My name is Carl Schultz. I'm the Dean of the College of Letters and Science. We like to brand Letters and Science as the heart of this great university. I get to welcome you to this La Follette School event, which is co-sponsored by the School of Law and the Wisconsin School of Business. In the College of Letters and Science, we aspire to provide a world-class education, which means that the students we work with are creative, they're analytic, and they are going to be, if not already, well-rounded global citizens who are going to be successful in the private sector, in the public sector, and the non-for-profit sectors. And it's obvious, or it goes without saying, that a stable and productive business environment and outstanding public service is critical for our futures. And so that's one of the reasons why I am so excited about kicking off this prestigious Fitch Lecture. The William Fitch Scholarship Fund was created with a specific goal of bringing to UW-Madison experts, particularly business people, to give lectures on the American free enterprise system. So Curt Culver, who you'll hear more about in a minute, exemplifies a life of purposeful leadership, both in the field of business while also looking for opportunities to help others in Wisconsin. We need more citizens like Curt, and I'm especially looking forward to the lessons he's going to share. Now, I am willing to bet that nobody here came here in order to hear the Dean of the College of Letters and Science drone on. And so I'm going to quickly then turn the podium over to Professor Susan Yockey, the incoming director of the La Follette School of Public Affairs, who's going to provide us more detail on why Curt was chosen by the university's lecture committee as the perfect person to give the Fitch Lecture. So Susan Yockey.
Before I get to that, the important business logistics. Reception following. Please be guided through to Steenbox. Join us for some drinks and some happy hour appetizers. Please do that. And also, Curt is willing to take some of our questions. Let's keep them mostly to the end of the talk. And at that point, we'll have a mic that'll go around. Raise your hand, ask a question. So, greetings. I'm Susan Yockey from the La Follette School of Public Affairs, and I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Curt Culver as our speaker today. Curt served as the Chief Executive Officer at MGIC Investment Corporation and its principal subsidiary, Guaranty Insurance Corporation, from 2000 to 2015. He joined MGIC in 1982. Although you might be more familiar with Curt's first work experience, which was at his parents' restaurant in Sauk City, Wisconsin, which is now expanded to over 600 restaurants in 24 states. If you've ever eaten a Butterburger, you have Curt partially to thank. Curt's an amazing businessman, but also an amazing public citizen. He serves or has served on a number of boards, including Big Brother Big Sisters in Milwaukee, the Greater Milwaukee Committee, the United Way of Greater Milwaukee, and the Children's Hospital of Wisconsin. Most importantly to me, he was one of our founding members of the La Follette School of Public Affairs Board of Visitors. Tomorrow night, you might not know, Curt is being inducted into the Wisconsin Business Hall of Fame. Curt is a proud graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where he earned a BBA and an MS with honors in real estate finance and urban land economics. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Curt Culver.
Well, I don't know if it's good to be here or not. I mean, we have a home in Naples, which we came up from, and it's a little different there. Who would have thunk, huh? First of all, thanks, Carl and Susan, for your introductions. And on tomorrow night, the Hall of Fame that's a big deal. One of our other members of our board, Shel Lubar, is being inducted also. And so it's quite an honor. And in my case, my brother was inducted 2 years ago. And so to have two brothers from different industries in that is quite a big deal, I think, because of my parents. I mean, the common denominator with Craig and I are mom and dad, and because Craig and I aren't that smart. And but as I will talk about my background to start, and then we'll get into leadership. But actually, as I looked at my comments, it's more about people that make a difference. Leadership's a part of that. And so we're going to talk about how you make a difference in work and in your life as our main point of our topic. I got my start in business, as Susan mentioned, at the A&W in Sauk City when I was 9 years old. We had that for 6 years, and I learned a lot. I mean, my parents were hard workers, and that was where Craig and I picked up our work ethic from watching mom and dad. And it was quite telling as you deal with the public at a young age. It really gave me a good background on what later helped me in business on my own. And it also helped me financially. When I was 9, I was doing the payroll for the A&W, and Craig obviously worked there, as did my sister. And I would always shortchange Craig a couple hours every work period. He never caught on. But it was a great learning experience to be working at the A&W. The only bad part was that for every weekend, we were working. And in fact, we then sold A&W when I was 16, a junior in high school, and bought a resort in Devil's Lake, to those of you that know the Baraboo area, the Farm Kitchen. And we owned that for 6 years. So through my junior and senior year of high school, and then my 4 years here in undergraduate school, we had the Farm Kitchen, and that was really a huge business. I mean, it was really a huge business. We had cabins. The restaurant would serve on Easter and Mother's Day over 2,000 dinners. So it was quite the business. And again, I saw my parents and the example that they set relative to work. They were working 20 hours a day, 6 days a week. We gave mom and dad off Monday. And I think about Craig and I running the resort on Mondays. That was always a unique experience too. But by the same token, Craig and I we were working 15 hours a day, 6 days a week, 90 hours. And on weekends, when I was coming here, I'd hitchhike home every weekend to work because we ran weekends through really December. And again, that work ethic that you get from doing that paid dividends for me later in life. As I said, the only bad part was from really 9 years old till 22, I never had a summer weekend off, ever. And so you now are looking why the reason I never went into the restaurant business. I didn't want to work weekends like that. Little did I know that my job led to that anyway. But so we went to a graduate school, and mom and dad sold the resort because they asked Craig and I. Well, they didn't really have to ask me. Dad knew I didn't want to stay in the business, but it was too large a business for mom and dad to run on their own. And Craig said, "No, I don't want to." He graduated. He was 2 years older, but we graduated at the same time. And he said, "I don't want to stay in the business either. I'd like to do something on my own." And so he got out of school. I got out of school, and I'll talk about this in a second, but worked at Barracks. To those of you that know the building, that big glass building at 150 East Gilman. So I worked there right out of graduate school. And Craig couldn't find work, if you will, so he went to work for McDonald's. And that, you're working a lot of hours, but this time you're not working for the family, you're working for a corporation. And so Craig went back to Dad. Dad had sold the Farm Kitchen, and Mom and Dad made a lot of money when they sold it. And so they retired. And so Craig went back to Dad after about a year working at McDonald's and said, "Dad, I'd love to buy our A&W back. It was for sale. And there's only one problem." And Dad said, "What's that?" "I don't have any money." "So Dad, would you buy it?" And Dad did. And they dropped the A&W franchise because A&W was selling root beer in grocery stores at that time, and it really destroyed the franchise value of an A&W. And so Dad dropped it, and they started Culver's Custard and Butterburgers, and that was 1984. And people kept stopping and saying, "Are there any more of these?" He said, "This is really good," in Sauk City. And Dad said, "Geez, maybe we ought to franchise this." So our first franchise, I think it was Reedsburg actually, 1992. And as Susan mentioned, we're now in 25 states. We just opened in Alabama with 652 restaurants. And Mom and Dad, the first year revenue for Mom and Dad was $10,000. Last year was $1.4 billion. So that tells you a lot about why, as I look at the Hall of Fame and I see Craig and I there, the real two that should be there are Mom and Dad, but we're deeply honored. Myself, as I said, I didn't want to stay in the restaurant business, went to Madison, thought I'd be in accounting until I took, I think, my second accounting course and said, Bob, and I said, this isn't for me. And at that time in the business school, they had a class called Business and Society where the major professors, maybe they still have it today, go through and talk about real estate, risk management, human resources, et cetera, and this fascinating gentleman, Jim Graskamp, quadriplegic, smartest guy I've ever met in my life, made a presentation on the real estate program. And I said, I don't know anything about it, but man, I want to learn from him. And so I went into the real estate program in undergraduate and graduate school. And one of the reasons that Sue, my wife and I, and I'll introduce Sue later, have done the charitable things that we've done is my junior and senior year in graduate school, Jim Graskamp worked to help me get scholarships because, you know, I said my brother was in school and so was my older sister, and so we all paid our own way. And you know, so you had some student loans, although at that time you could make much more in the summer to cover the cost than you can today. But Jim helped me get scholarships from individuals that I didn't know at all. I mean, but and I thought, what, isn't that outstanding that some people would help me and they don't even know me? And that was really a big deal in my life on saying, you know, this is when if I ever get to a point where I can help someone, we're going to help somebody. And so we've been fortunate financially that we can do that. But that was all a lesson learned really from Jim Graskamp. And then the wonderful things I learned from him. I mean, I was a golfer. I played on the golf team my freshman year here. And here's Jim, quadriplegic. He could tell me more about the golf swing than I knew. And it just showed the amazing mind that he had. So he was a wonderful mentor for me, and that's why the University of Wisconsin, for many reasons, is such a special place for me personally. And so out of graduate school, immediately the week after I graduated, I took a job with Verex, which I mentioned is the building at 150 East Gilman, no longer in business, however, and worked 6 years there and learned another wonderful lesson about life from the aspect of I love the company, I love Madison, I love my coworkers, but we had got a promotion and had a new CEO who I had golfed with a number of times and noticed he didn't count all his strokes and he didn't pay his bets. And I came home to Sue and said, you know, this guy's not my new boss and I don't want him controlling my career. I don't trust him. And this is a lesson I'll talk about later too. So we had another, Verex at that time was the second largest mortgage insurer in the country. MGIC is the largest, based in Milwaukee. And I had some friends and I said, gee, is there anything open? And they said, yeah, there's things open. Why don't you come and apply? And so I did and was offered a job, and that was 1982. Verex went out of business in 1988. And here I am talking to you after 34 years at MGIC, 16 plus as the CEO. So it tells you, sometime along the way you need to make tough decisions about your life, which is really what I'm going to talk about today, relative to making a difference. As I've worked these 55, 56 years now, I've learned a lot about people and about making a difference. And as I look at how do you make a difference in your work and your life, there's really three areas that I think really make a difference. And the first is leadership, the second is ownership, and the third is fulfillment. And on leadership, when you look at who are great leaders, it's not about titles at all. I've seen some CEOs that were the worst examples of leadership. But what leadership really is about people that have talent and put that talent into action. I mean, I can tell you we had a guard at MGIC, a parking attendant. We lost him far too early. But Jim created such a wonderful example to anyone that came to our building. Anyone that came to my office would mention, wow, I learned more about the company in that short walk from my car to your elevator than I knew ever before. And what a wonderful person to talk about your company. So every job is a leadership job if you want to make that job a leadership job, because leadership isn't about power either. It's really about people that have a purpose and pursue that purpose with a passion. I mean, if you don't love what you do, and I've had to have some tough counseling sessions with people over the years relative to their jobs where they had some issues going on, and I just said, you know, if you don't love it, you need to leave. As much as you've done a good job for us, etc. If you don't love what you do, you cannot make a difference in your work, and you're going to feel terrible relative to your life itself. I mean, how bad is it if you don't enjoy what you're doing and you're doing it every day for the rest of your life? That doesn't make sense. So leadership really, as I said, doesn't revolve around titles. It doesn't revolve around power. It revolves around people that have a purpose and pursue that purpose with a passion. And to have that passion, you need, what I say, to be massively competent. Today's world, and we went through this at MGIC, we survey our coworkers every year about, you know, what can we do better? And for many years, in my early years, it was, well, gee, I wish there was a career path. Well, in today's world, there's no longer career paths. It's moving way too quickly for career paths. And so my counseling to them was, learn everything you can about the company, and you will find opportunities in this company. Become massively competent, and you will control your career rather than your career controlling you. And I mean, truer words had never been spoken. That's how I did, frankly, that's how I got the promotions I did. I never pursued a different job in the company. It was just others spotted someone of talent and said, you know, that Culver would be good at this job, and that job, and that job. And so if all I can tell you is just keep learning. It is so important relative to your career happiness. And it'll make such a difference in you doing what you really want to do with your life as far as work. So become massively competent. The second area after leadership that I think is so important and so missing in today's society is taking ownership. And what I mean about taking ownership is doing the right thing. May not always be the popular thing, but doing the right thing. At MGIC, we tried to free up the organization. We limited management as much as we could because I always knew the people at the front lines in the action were the ones that really knew what to do. And if they were just had the freedom to feel confident in doing that without someone watching over them very closely, good things happened. One of my proudest moments at MGIC was my last day there, and Sue and Christine, our daughter, came to listen to me. That we had a company-wide meeting, and I got to address all our coworkers. And a young man after in the marketing department came up and said, Mr. Culver, I had not met him, he'd been with us for a year. I said, I had these coffee cups made up for the marketing department and I want you to have one. I said, oh, that's very nice. And I looked at it, just do the right thing, Curt S. Culver. Had coffee with it yesterday, actually. But it was such a, for me, such a telling moment about, you know, what the organization thought of me and what I thought of them. That it really was a wonderful moment. But people always know what the right thing to do is, but so often companies get in the way of preventing that from happening. So you need always to pursue doing the right thing. And even more importantly, and this frankly is a secret to Culver's success, is you need to take ownership and responsibility for your actions. I will say if there's one thing I've noticed more and more of, it's the fact that people don't. They always have an excuse, somebody else did it, blah, 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 blah. And I will tell you, there is nothing more moving for someone that I'm looking at an organization when somebody says, you know what, I screwed up. This is what I'm going to do about it, and I fix it. And that you get people like that have that kind of confidence. I mean, we talked at MGIC that failure is the highway to success. You cannot do things well if you don't fail somewhere along the line. It just happens. You're not going to be right every single time. And yet, far too often, people want to blame that on someone else rather than taking responsibility. I can tell you one of the things that Culver's does well is when we screw up, and hopefully if that happens, you should fill out a comment card because we review those at the board meetings, and we make it right. And I will tell you, when you do that, you get a customer for life. I mean, whereas if you'd done it right all along, they probably wouldn't be as strong a customer as they were. But once you screw up, you fix it and get a solution that is proper, you got someone for life. And yet our society today, I think, just encourages people not to do that. And I think it's really been something that's troubling to me as I see business today, that people don't take responsibility. Because when you have an organization where people will share credit but take blame individually, you'll have an organization that will move mountains. And I'm very fortunate I had an organization that did that. The next point under ownership that I think is so important is to have strong principles. And this was driven into me by my parents over and over again, not so much by words, but by watching them in business. And Dad would say, you know, principles are to people like roots are to trees. Without them, you're blown over. And you learn quickly in business, like in life, that honesty, integrity, fairness, respect aren't just things you talk about, but they're what you do in running your business and living your life. And having strong principles is a very, very important step in being successful at anything you do, and then being happy at what you do. And the final point under ownership that I think is so important, and I see, again, maybe less and less, well, more and more of it, is never to settle for mediocrity. And unfortunately, I'm seeing that happen more and more often in our society today, where okay is good enough. And it's not. When something happens, you should be pleased. I mean, when somebody comes to our restaurants, you should leave fulfilled, if you will. And somebody should acknowledge that with a thank you for doing business, and not, no problem. I mean, if there's one thing that drives me crazy, it's when you do a transaction and the clerk says, no problem. You know what? It is a problem. Say thank you. But we've settled too much on mediocrity, and that's not right. We are all better than that. So that's the second point that I think is so important in taking ownership. And then the third, and the point of what I call fulfillment, is having, living your life and doing your work in a way that you're happy and that you enjoy. I go back to the point I made earlier in this discussion when I said, you know, if you don't do something you really love, you should do something else. And I've had to have, as I said, I had those meetings at MGIC with people that were good performers for us, but really weren't happy. And long term, you cannot do something well if you don't love it. I mean, I lectured in the business school here for 24 years, and particularly the early sessions, you know, a number of the students were thinking, you know, how can I make a lot of money? And I'm talking about happiness. And I will tell you, money takes care of itself. Just to use me as an example, when I got out of graduate school here, so that's 1976, or 75, December 75, I started working at Barracks January 2nd. My salary out of graduate school, $800 a month. Not a whole lot of money. My first goal, well, and I did have another offer to someone in Chicago that was quite a bit more than that, but I don't want to live in Chicago. I want to live in Madison. And so my goal was to make my age at some point in my life. I wanted to make my age as income, and that happened quicker than I thought it would. But it spoke a lot about, you know, because I always loved what I did, that money takes care of itself. And I know it's hard, particularly to students, to realize that, because you know, when I talk to business school, they all want to go to work at Goldman Sachs, and we did enough public offerings through Goldman that I know those young people killed themselves during those early years, and what a tough thing it is in search of the elusive buck. And I will tell you, I'm sure they're much happier when they're doing something else in their life, and money took care of itself. So you need to have fun with your work and enjoy it, or it's a long life. And in order to do that, I found the key to success, the key to happiness in work and life, was balance. And I can't tell you how important that was, because we went through a very difficult period at MGIC. We went through 5 years where we didn't think the company would make it. And we were a publicly traded company. Our stock went from a high in March of 2007 of $76 a share. I bought many, many shares for less than $1 5 years later. And so we went through a very, very tough time for a long time. And the beauty that I could relate to in my life was that I had these other things that kept me on kilter. And so when you look at balance in your life, you have to take your work, your family, your hobbies. I love to golf. That was a great release for me during this period of time. In my case, religion may not be everyone's, but it's very important. My faith played a big role in my life. Charitable organizations, we talked about some of the things that I did and how important they are in your life. One of my good friends, Marty Stein, some of you from Milwaukee may know Marty or know the name anyway. When I chaired the board of the United Way for a number of years, and when Marty was convincing me that, Curt, you should do this, he said one of these great things to me. He said, Curt, your legacy in life won't be about what you did for a living, but rather what you do with your living. And truer words couldn't have been spoken. The charitable things that I've been involved with, both my time and soon my resources, have been very important in that balance of my life. And another, I think, what's so important is get involved in your community. Get involved, if you will, in politics. You know, there's no need complaining about what's going on in the world, and do something about it. But all these things are very, very important in forming a life of happiness that will really help you make a difference in your life. And it's not as though there are periods of time, I had periods of time in 2007 through 12 that 100% of my time was taken by work. And you miss kids stuff, and that's very difficult. But then at other points in time, you know, that work was much less of my life, and the family and the hobbies and all those other things kicked in. So it just, the more you can have that you have something that you can offset from the issues that you may have in one area of your life, you got these other areas to count on, is very, very important to living a life of happiness. And in order to get there, and this gets to my 5 H's that I talked about with our organization and some of the charitable things that I get involved with. And the first is a sense of humor. And it was funny watching Barbara Bush this morning when they're doing, you know, talk about her and her husband, and she said, you know, what attracted me to George was his sense of humor. And Sue has said many times, I thought it was my looks and everything else. She said, you know, Curt, it was your sense of humor. And you know, I talked about a lot at MGIC from the aspect of a sense of humor doesn't mean that you don't take your job seriously. What it means is you don't take yourself seriously. And that, you know, there's some people, it's like, this is brain surgery for everybody, and it's not. Don't take yourself seriously, but take your work seriously. Enjoy what you do, laugh at work. Self-deprecation is a wonderful thing. I had a couple of executives that, I mean, to this day, and we're all retired, but still we kid each other on some of the things we said about each other when we were working together. So sense of humor, health is next. And again, you're younger, you don't see what I see at 66. But I can tell you, if you don't take time for exercise now, you'll pay for it later. And if you don't take care of yourself now, you will pay for it later. One of the things, my father lost his vision the last number of years of his life. And it really related about, he had detached retinas, and when we had the farm kitchen, and he just wouldn't take the time. I don't, to any of you, I've had two myself, so I can relate to it. You got to sit still and keep your head in position for a couple of weeks. And Dad didn't do that. He just felt we had to keep working at the restaurant, and ultimately it cost him his vision. And I will tell you, in those years when he lost his vision, he would have traded everything about Culver's for one eye. And it just, again, points up the importance of money versus other things in your life. So take care of your health. It's so important relative to a life well lived. The third area is honesty. And this relates back to, again, frankly, it's a bedrock of both your personal life and your business life. If you don't work for a company you trust, go work somewhere else. If you don't have a boss you trust, many times, and again, as a chief executive, I can relate to this. I had managers that we just can't change like that, but I understood our coworkers' issue with that manager. But we couldn't let the manager go. There wasn't reasons for that, but they didn't trust him. And again, my counsel there is then you need to find a different job. But you need to be in a situation where you can trust who you work for, or whatever you do, your mate in life, whatever the case may be, both your personal and business, needs to be a trustworthy relationship. And it's the bedrock of everything you'll do. The fourth area is hustle. And we had a saying at MGIC, and it's quite popular elsewhere, I guess, if you want something different, you have to do something different. And my kids have heard that ad nauseum, but it's so true. I mean, so often we wait for something to change outside of our control, and it never does. It always gets worse. So if you put things off, thinking things will change, again, I can almost guarantee they'll get worse in the meantime. So it's back to, again, the reason I left Varex was, as I talked about, I didn't trust my boss. If you want something different, you have to do. They weren't going to change the CEO. I mean, I was going to be the one that would suffer under that relationship. And so I did something about it. You know, what a wonderful lesson that was for me relative to making decisions all along the way, that if you want something different, you got to do it yourself. It won't happen on its own. So a wonderful lesson. And then the last is humility. And again, MGIC started the industry in 1956. And so we've always been the market share leader, you know, forever. And that's hard to do. I mean, organizations, when they are successful, many times get arrogant. So my predecessor, Bill Lacey, would always remind us that nothing fails like success. Nothing fails like success. Organizations that are successful way too often, and you'll see it in sports many times, but when they get that way, they get arrogant. They start reading their own press clippings and start believing how good they really are and lose contact with customers. And I can tell you that one of the most important things is just to remember nothing fails like success. If you keep that attitude, keep humble, be thankful, count your blessings, not your press clippings, you will always be successful at what you do. People like to do business with people that they like and that they respect and that they care for. So it's just a great lesson in life. So those are my 5 H's to balance in your life. And I've thought a lot about one other. When I chaired United Way, one of the things we did, and you know, we were raising 50-some million at that time. And one of the things I saw, and we poured a lot of it in the inner city, that the young people in the inner city didn't have hope. And I think there's a 6H there, that you always need to have hope. Sue and I went through a situation with a daughter that was ill, and we started to lose hope. And man, is it a terrible thing when you don't have hope. And then God smiled on us, and you know, it's been great since. But I looked at the kids in the inner city and why they do drugs and why they don't go to school and why they commit crimes. They have no hope. They have nothing to look forward to. And so I think it's another one of these things that you always need hope in your life, to know there's a better day ahead. And there always will be. There always will be. But you have to make that happen. So let me close and then take questions about anything you want to talk about, Culver's, MGIC life, and golf, weather. But it's a quote by Leo Roston, and my wife's heard it many times, so sorry, Sue. But it really, when I saw this, and I said, you know, this is how I want to live my life. And I saw it about 10 years ago, and again, MGIC people have heard it way too often, but you can't say it enough. And this is how, when I eulogize my mother and my dad, I talk this about them, and particularly my mother, because she asked that I say this. So here it is, by Leo Roston. I cannot believe that the sole purpose of life is to be happy. Rather, I think the purpose of life is to be useful, to be responsible, to be compassionate. It is, above all else, to matter, to count, to stand for something, to have made some difference that you lived at all. To have made some difference that you lived at all. And that's the opportunity all of you have when you leave this wonderful institution and go out and make a difference in the world. And remember this wonderful institution when you do, so you can help all the young people that I'm looking forward here today, and all others in your life, so that you can make a difference in their life. It's really a wonderful thing when that happens and you realize what the importance in life really is. Thank you. Thanks. So anyway, I'd love to answer anything you want to talk about. So if there's something that, Sue, is there anything you want to ask me? This is my wife, Sue, anyway. Sue and I have been married 37 years, and we have two wonderful children, Patrick in Green Bay, still probably snow plowing, and Christine, who's in Milwaukee, and wonderful kids. And Sue traveled when the kids left, and I entertained a lot around MGIC is a national company, and so we do business in every state. We're probably the #1 market share in 45 states, so we're big everywhere, and so we have customers everywhere. And again, most of them are where mortgages are originated, which is California, Florida, Texas, Pennsylvania, etc. And so she would travel with me many times, and was one of our ace business developers relative to developing relationships with our customers and their spouses. So she was really outstanding to help for me in my work. I can probably hear you if you want to.
Yeah, so a lot of the people here are students at the College School of Public Affairs.
Yeah.
I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how the private sector and the public sector and leadership within both of those sectors could work together better than they do now.
Yeah, I had a great example of it when MGIC went through its issues. We worked extremely closely with the Officer Commissioner of Insurance, the OCI, and the staff there had been there many, many years, still there. And the respect that I got, because we needed Wisconsin to help us across all the country. Again, we're regulated by 50 state insurance departments, so when you got issues, you got to deal with everyone individually, and the people there were just outstanding in making things happen for us nationally. And I don't hear that all the time about other areas, but I'll tell you, when it happens, it's magic. And to get it to happen, I guess, more often, the world's gotten so cruel, and we just need to respect what other people do. And I don't know how we teach nice again, but the partisanship involved at all levels. I spent a big part of my life in Washington. Our company was, although regulated on the state insurance department basis, two institutions, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, that were government-sponsored enterprises that actually failed, unbelievably to me that could happen, but it did. And so I spent a lot of my time in Washington, and the toxic nature that's there. I don't know how we get that back, other than, to me, when you demonstrate you're really good at something, so public or private, you get the respect of everyone. And that's the one thing, again, on the interactions we had with the OCI, that they were good. And so there's nothing that earns respect better than someone doing a good job. So I would just say, just do a good job, and I'll tell you what, everyone respects that, regardless of where you are politically. People respect people that do good work. Yes. Yeah, I think when I was younger, I was more controlling. And as I advanced in my career, it was really, as a CEO, you're kind of like a maestro with an orchestra out there of people that, I can't play the cello. I know you can, but I'll tell you when to play. And that really is what happens as you run a company. You just know there's not enough time. I couldn't do the general counsel's job, I couldn't do the CFO's job, but I can orchestrate all the interactions with the company and them, and our outside dealings. So I think as I aged, I became more tolerant of and respectful of the great job individuals did, and let them run with it. Getting back to, again, if you talk to someone at MGIC, I think they'd say, what's Curt, what's his deal? And I'd say, just do the right thing. It's whatever. And that's what I learned. I learned people don't need to be managed so closely. They know what to do. And you can be much more efficient. If you destroy the politics of a company or anything that you're involved with, and that people feel free to make decisions to fail, but fix it. As I said, you can really move mountains. So I think as I advanced and became more confident in my own abilities, I became more confident of everyone I worked with. And it really was a wonderful culture that we have at MGIC. One of the things I was most proud of was we went from 2007 to 2012, when again, most of those years people didn't get merit increases, the management team didn't get any bonuses, the stock, where many of the people had been paid over the years, had lost tremendous value. Most of our coworkers had that in their IRAs, 401ks, so they lost a lot of retirement. And yet, through every one of those years, we were voted in the top 10 companies to work for in the state, even though they weren't getting any money and things of that sort. So it was just a wonderful thing for me. And that actually, Carl and Susan will hear me talk a little bit about that tomorrow. Our tenure at MGIC was 18 years. That's something in a company today to have that. And I think a lot of it was because of our culture. And it's kind of like I tried to run it like Mom and Dad ran the business. Family, everyone's family. That was the hardest part. For me, when we were struggling, and as I said, the stock creator, making those quarterly earning calls, very, very difficult. You get beat up a lot. But I was more worried about the company making it, because I knew all our coworkers and their spouses, and I know many, in some cases, their children. And you know, it's like, what are these people going to do with the company that goes out of work? I mean, where are they going to make a living that they're making here? And we persevered through some luck, but some real management talent of the people I work with that, you know, made things happen. Anything else? Yeah.
You've had a great life so far. What do you want to do next?
Well, I'm really busy. I'm not kidding. I'm still not an executive chairman of MGIC. So as I tell people, I run the board, not the company. I'm on the board of We Energies. I had the finance area there, and from the board of finance committee. On the board of Culver's, and so I'm probably more active than my brother would like. But we sold an interest in the company this past year, and that's more my talent than his. So I played a key role in making that happen. I'm the lead director at West Bend Mutual. So to those of you, I know we're in a town of American Family here, and they're a wonderful company, but West Bend's a really good company. It has a culture very similar to MGIC. On the board of the Bradley Foundation, and we've got meetings next week on that. And then on the nonprofit area, I just came off as chairman of UPAF, United Performing Art Fund. On this board, I'm on the Badger Advocates. I don't know if everyone knows what they do here for the university, but we try and represent the chancellor's position to our state legislators, and you know, because many of us are donors, so we have more success in trying to get things to happen. And I'm on the board of the Mockley Foundation in Naples, and we're making a real dent there on migrant workers getting their children educated. And also on the Wisconsin State Golf Association board of the foundation. So I as Sue knows, I need to be doing stuff, and then I'm golfing, and so it's really it's nice, you know. I went a long time where I didn't sleep well, and I still maybe don't, but I sleep much better, and I had to, you know, get up early in the morning, head off to work, and now I can read the Wall Street Journal, read the Journal Sentinel, and do the crossword puzzles, and ease into my day. And then, you know, then you get some board activities and some fun activities. So it's quite a busy period of time. So I'm actually thinking I'm too busy right now. So the people at Aurora were kind enough to ask me to join their board, and I said, I don't think I can. I just don't think I have the time. But I haven't said no yet either. So that was always my problem. Martha Pavlovic, who was my administrative assistant for, I don't know, Sue, how many years, 20 some years. And back to the sense of humor, man, Martha had a great sense of humor. And she always made me laugh. When we're in the worst of times, she always could make something funny. I don't know where I was going with Martha. Oh yeah, Martha would always remind me, Curts, just say no. Just say no. And I don't have that voice in my head right now to say no, and I think I need to do that more often now. Yes. I think the structure relative to compensation and benefits and all the other things, even, you know, with Culver's today, even we're trying to get more of that to make sure jobs are paid fairly relative to jobs in the marketplace. When you're in a corporate setting, they really do mark jobs and say, you know, this job gets paid this, you got these salary the target and maximum, etc. So you have those much more structure from the compensation standpoint. I would say that from a family to a corporate setting, But that being said, I mean, if you just have a strategy, and I'm on enough comp committees, so I'm pretty good in that area now. But if you just have a strategy that, you know, you pay fairly, and people will tell you if they don't think they're being paid fairly, and listen to that. I tried to bring the Culver culture to MGIC, and was thankful that, you know, we were quite a ways there when I took the helm. And another story I'll tell tomorrow. But when I did get the job, and it was the October 1999 board meeting, and one of our directors is Shel Lubar. He was, although they didn't call him then at the time, he was frankly our lead director. And Bill Lacey, who was our CEO at the October meeting, announces, "I'm going to retire at year end." I mean, you just don't do that in the public. Like when I retired, I gave the board 2 years notice that I was going to retire. Well, for personal reasons, Bill was retired. Michelle said, I can remember the board meeting, and I'm sitting right there. Well, who's going to take his place? And Bill says, I think Curt Culver would be the one. And Shell says, you mean that kid with the long hair? I said, I'm sitting right here, Shell. But the kid got a haircut and got the job. And that was, you know, 1/1 of 2000 that I started, and then retired March of 2015. And, you know, that was a bittersweet moment too. I mean, but really, I have to tell you, as the more I'm out of it, and not having to deal with particularly the investment community, one of the beauties of Culver's versus what my job was is, you're a private company, we can grow at our own pace, which we did, where as a public company, you know, you have a lot of pressure every quarter to do something. And a lot of times there's just nothing you can do. I mean, the world is what the world is, and you can only do so much on being efficient and trying to get market share. So if you have your druthers in working in life, if you get involved in the business community, probably a mutual is the best of all worlds, and then a private company, and then public ownership, which is difficult but still very fun. I mean, I'm in New York all the time making investor presentations. That was always fun, just to get to New York. But some of those meetings were quite as much fun. Yes. Yeah, I will tell you, I think it's more the opposite. I think the world's more like what I talked about than what you described in the cutthroat area. I mean, certainly there are larger companies maybe that have to deal with activist shareholders and things of that sort, and I guess we did to an extent, but along the way, you know, because you do investor presentations and you're up there probably with 20 different CEOs from all different industries, you know, Goldman Sachs or Merrill Lynch or Morgan Stanley would hold an investor conference, and you'd speak for a half an hour, but I'd listen to other speakers that day and from different industries. You know, some certainly had that culture, and it reflected the CEO. I mean, I met some real jerks that were running companies, and I think, wow, I'd hate to work there. But I would say for the most part, it's more like, you know, I got to retain people, and I will tell you that is the big challenge of business going forward, is finding adequate talent. That I need to have a culture that people want to work here, and I think that may be a revelation for some, but in general, I think it's more my world than the dog-eat-dog world. I will tell you, I mean, part of why I lectured on some of this stuff in the business school, I talk about the mortgage finance system and secondary marketing and things, but I'd also talk about was really, I mean, CEOs I thought were getting a bad rap. For the most part, people really care. they care deeply about their company and their people that work there, and it's their family. So I tried to, convey that to the young people. Hope they believed it. I think they did. Carl, did you have it?
Yeah, I was curious, when you were in an executive position, how did you stay fresh over the years? Was it from peers? Did you have mentors? Did you do a lot of reading? Was it just the experiences that you had that challenged you in different ways?
It gets back to that balance in my life, that I didn't always worry about work, and so I was always kind of refreshed from that aspect, that I had other things. I mean, I can't tell you how important the charitable activities I was involved with when the things were really bad at the company, that I had an outlet to go to chair a United Way meeting versus listening to another issue that we have at MGIC. And so I think that balance really was amazing for me relative to keeping my sanity some days, because our CFO would plop down in my office every day and tell me, Curt, you're not going to believe how bad this is. And it's like, one day I just said, Mike, would you just lie to me once? But he didn't. But I think that, man, that's really, that balance I think is so important. No matter what your issues are in your life, if you got other things that you can rally around, it really makes a tremendous difference. Yes. I think you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you think Culver's will continue to be a privately held company, and more importantly, a family-owned company?
Yeah, our challenge is that we have children that aren't actively involved in the business. So my brother has 3 daughters. They're not. Actually, one's getting married Saturday. Our 2 children aren't. They have their own careers. My sister's 2 boys aren't, although one just resigned from Harley Davidson and is going through considering buying a franchise. So, when you have the 3rd generation, I think is always a very difficult one relative to a family business. I'm making the transition to them running it. We have a non-Culver CEO right now. Craig's retired as CEO, and he just does the ads, which you see him on TV, and goes to new store openings. But we're very active on a board level. I mean, lots of questions. So we sold a minority interest in the company, which was a wonderful transaction for the family. It was done for a couple of reasons. One, thinking about, maybe 10 years from now, it'd be nice to have some of this professional management that's involved with the private equity fund that's our partner, looking at the situation. And then also my sister's older, she's 70, and was net worth wealthy but cash poor. And she wasn't as fortunate as Craig and I financially, and so the transaction allowed her to live the life that she would like to live that her dad always wanted her to live. And that's another story that I don't think very few people know. I mean, the reason we have Mom and Dad got in the restaurant business at all, Dad worked for Wisconsin Dairies in Sauk City, Wisconsin, and he got transferred to a little town, Union Center, which some of you that know Tommy Thompson, that's right next to Elroy. Not much going on, population 250. And Georgia was a freshman in high school, and Craig and I are little, we're playing Little League and all that, so we fit in right away. Well, Georgia happened to be dating someone in Sauk City where she left high school to go to Waniwak, which was high school, and she didn't like it at all. She cried all the time. And so Dad, taking care of his little daughter, bought the A&W in Sauk City so that we could move back, and Georgia could go back to high school and be with her friends. And so I think about my parents again, the example that they set. In one case, we only got into the restaurant business because my sister was unhappy, and then we only got into Culver's because Craig needed help, and Mom and Dad were happily retired. I mean, they were enjoying life, and they put up the money to buy the A&W and went in as half partners with Craig and Lee, and so the Culver story happened really because of trying to help 2 kids. So they were good people, mom and dad. Tough boss, dad was, but then we'd always go to mom. Yeah, you know how that works. Yeah. Yeah, it comes back to that respect part, doing good work, and it gets noticed. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm used to wandering. It's a very worthy calling. I think anyone considering it should do it, and do a great job of it. You know, the thing that the private sector has over the public, both in education and other areas, I think, is the compensation system and rewarding achievement more than I think the public rewards seniority. And we need to change that so we get high performers staying at whatever their business might be, when teaching or working in the public. But I think the compensation system is broken relative to the public sector. And so people get mad that others are doing well and they're not, and yet they're working very, very hard. And the private sector says, well, then take a job here. I mean, do this. And yet that's not their calling. They don't want to do that. They should be rewarded adequately for what they're doing. So I don't know how to fix that other than, you know, the voting process, electing people that understand that every job's important, and people that do a good job should do better. But man, if I could do that, well, I was going to run for the Senate at one time, but I'd rethink if I had that ability to make a change like that. We should reward talent, and I don't think the public sector has that opportunity. They don't have enough dollars.
We can continue this conversation over drinks. Let's do that. Let's
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Susan. Thank you. You're very kind.